Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Families always say they'll come together in hard times, but sometimes together just means one relative raids grandma's fridge, changes the locks, and claims squatters' rights before the funeral flowers have even wilted. Today in the rLounge, meet Uncle Jerry, the human embodiment of down on his luck and up in someone else's house. Uncle squatted in my inheritance, so I hosted a for sale open house while he was still sleeping. My grandmother died suddenly from a heart attack 2 weeks ago. We were close. She practically raised me after my parents divorced and my mom moved us in with her. I spent every summer with her, even after we moved out. After the funeral, I met with the executor of her will. I knew my grandmother had some savings, but I was shocked when he told me she'd left me her house. It's a modest 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood that's been in our family for decades. The will was crystal clear. The house belonged to me, free and clear. I was overwhelmed. I already had my own place, but the housing market is hot right now, and selling my grandmother's house would give me enough to pay off my student debt loans and maybe even to put down a payment on a better place. Plus, keeping it would mean property taxes and maintenance costs I wasn't sure I could handle. The executor handed me the keys and all the paperwork. I decided to visit the house that weekend to assess its conditions and figure out what I wanted to do with it. When I pulled up to the driveway, I was surprised to see my Uncle Jerry's car parked there. Uncle Jerry is my mom's brother. He's always been the family freeloader, bouncing between relatives' homes whenever he's down on his luck, which seems to be most of the time. He and my grandmother had a complicated relationship. She loved him, of course, but she was always bailing him out of one mess or another. I knocked on the door thinking maybe he was just checking on the place or grabbing some of his stuff he'd stored there. When he opened the door, I was shocked to see he was in pajamas. I asked what he was doing there, and he casually informed me he was just staying temporarily until he got back on his feet. Looking around, I could see that he'd completely moved in. His clothes were in the closets, his food was in the fridge, and he'd even put up some of his tacky sports memorabilia on the walls where my grandmother's family photos used to hang. I told him he couldn't just move in, that the house was mine now, according to grandmother's will. He laughed it off, saying grandmother would have wanted him to have a place to stay and that she wouldn't want me to throw him out on the street. I told him I wasn't throwing him out today, but he needed to find another place to live soon because this house wasn't his. He just dismissed me and went back to watching TV like I wasn't even there. I decided to try talking to him one more time. When I arrived at the house a few days later, my key didn't work. The bastard had changed the locks without telling me. I had to knock and wait for him to let me in. He claimed he had secured the place because of supposed break-ins in the neighborhood. When I reminded him that this was my house, things got ugly. He dropped his just staying temporarily act and showed his true colors. He claimed he deserved the house more than me because he was closer to my grandmother than I ever was. According to him, he took care of her while I was off living my life. That was complete BS. I visited her every week and called her daily, while he only showed up when he needed money or a place to crash. He then claimed grandmother had told him many times she wanted him to have the house, and that the will didn't reflect her true wishes. When I asked why she hadn't changed it then, he had no answer. Instead, he threatened that if I tried to force him out, he'd make things very difficult for me. He said he knew his rights, that it would take months to evict him, and he'd fight it every step of the way. He asked if that was really how I wanted to honor my grandmother's memory, with a legal battle. I left feeling defeated and furious. The next day I consulted with a property attorney who confirmed what my research had already told me. Evicting Uncle Jerry would be a long, expensive process. He suggested I begin formal eviction proceedings immediately, which I did, but warned me it could take months. I was at my wit's end when I remembered something my grandmother had once mentioned about Uncle Jerry. He took sleeping pills and slept like the dead until noon every day. That's when the idea hit me. If the legal system was going to take forever, maybe I needed to get creative. I contacted a friend who works in real estate to help me execute my plan. Together, we created a fake for sale listing for the house, priced it at about 30% below market value to ensure we get plenty of interest. We scheduled an open house for 9 a.m. on a Saturday. I remembered my grandmother's neighbor mentioning she had an emergency key to the house. I called her, explained the situation. She was well aware of Uncle Jerry's history, and she happily gave me the spare key. On Saturday morning, I arrived at the house at 8:30 a.m. with my real estate friend. We quickly set up open house signs in the front yard and prepared the property for viewing. By 9 a.m., there was already a line of about 15 potential buyers outside, drawn to the too good to be true listing price. My real estate friend guided the tour, explaining the features of the house while I stayed near the hallway that led to the bedroom where Uncle Jerry was still sleeping. The buyers were confused about why one bedroom was off limits, but my friend explained that A relative is temporarily staying but will be gone by closing. The open house was going perfectly. People were loving the house, discussing where they'd put their furniture, asking about the school district, and talking about making offers. I overheard several couples planning to bid above the asking price, even though it was already a steal. Then, around 10:30 a.m., it happened. Uncle Jerry emerged from the bedroom in nothing but his underwear. He froze when he saw a living room full of strangers examining his house. The look on his face was priceless. He shouted, "What the hell's going on here?" I stepped forward and said that this was my house. I was selling it, and he was trespassing. The atmosphere in the room immediately became tense. Uncle Jerry started yelling at everyone to get out, causing the potential buyers to quickly make their exits. Once everyone had left, Uncle Jerry turned his fury on me. He called me every name in the book and threatened to call the police. I encouraged him to do exactly that, asking him to please explain to them how he was illegally occupying my property. I left the house feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. I knew I'd escalate the situation, but frankly, I was tired of playing by the rules when Uncle Jerry clearly wasn't. I sent the family group chat a copy of the will and property deed, showing my clear ownership, along with photos of the changes Uncle Jerry had made to the house without permission. I also pointed out that he had changed the locks to keep me out of my house. Some family members went quiet after that, but Uncle Jerry's most loyal defenders, including my mother, continued to insist I should just let him have the house. I decided to host a second open house when I knew Uncle Jerry had gone out for groceries. This time he returned home to find another group of strangers touring the house. He had another public meltdown, screaming at the potential buyers. One of them recorded his outburst, and the video started circulating among local real estate groups. People were commenting things to like, "Avoid this property," and "Seller has squatter issues." I scheduled a third open house, but this time sent a formal invitation to Uncle Jerry stating, "Since you believe you have rights to the property, you should be present to discuss it with potential buyers." He didn't respond to the invitation, but interestingly, he didn't show up at the house that day either. When I drove by the property later that evening, I noticed his car was gone. I used my spare key to enter and found that he had also removed some of his own belongings. I'm not sure if my open house strategy is what finally drove him out, or if he just realized I wasn't going to back down. Either way, I'm changing the locks tomorrow and installing a better security system. I'll also be filing a police report for the stolen items. Update. Thanks for all the comments and support on my original post. A lot has happened since then, and I wanted to give you all an update on the situation with my squatting uncle. First off, I did change the locks immediately after discovering Uncle Jerry had left. I also installed cameras covering every entrance. The day after I secured the property, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Uncle Jerry using a new phone. He had the nerve to claim he did me a favor by leaving and demanded $5,000 for relocation expenses. He threatened to tell potential buyers about problems with the house if I didn't pay up. I filed a police report for the theft and property damage. I estimated about $15,000 worth of my grandmother's possessions were missing. When the police searched his car, they found a box containing some of my grandmother's jewelry and other valuables he had apparently come back to get. Those items were specifically mentioned in my grandmother's will as belonging to me, which added to theft charges. The family drama intensified after his arrest. My phone blew up with messages from relatives taking sides. Uncle Jerry's supporters claimed I was being vindictive and should have just let him have a place to stay. My mother was particularly upset, saying I'd ruined her brother's life over just some stuff in a house. When I attended the court hearing, he pleaded guilty to lesser charges but was ordered to pay restitution for the stolen items and property damage. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order. I was finally able to focus on preparing the house for sale. I accepted an offer from a young family who fell in love with the neighborhood. Several neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves and share stories about my grandmother. They also mentioned how relieved they were that my uncle wasn't moving in permanently, as he'd apparently been quite rude. I'll post another update if anything happens. Thanks again for all your support and advice. Small update. First, the good news. I've used the money from selling my grandmother's house to pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a condo closer to downtown. And the best part is that I own it outright with no mortgage. Now for the Uncle Jerry developments. About a month after my last update, I got a call from my cousin, Jerry's son, telling me that Uncle Jerry was in the hospital. Apparently he'd been staying at a cheap motel and had a minor heart attack. He wasn't in critical condition, but it was serious enough to require a few days at the hospital. I received notice that Uncle Jerry had only paid a small fraction of the court-ordered restitution for the damage to grandmother's house. The court issued a wage garnishment order, but since he wasn't employed, there wasn't much to garnish. He is now staying at a cousin's property in a small guest house, under strict conditions. He's also working part-time at the cousin's landscaping business to pay rent and build some savings. As for me, I've maintained my distance. My mother and I have actually grown closer through this experience. She's apologized multiple times for not believing me initially and for enabling his behavior for so many years. I doubt I'll need to post any further updates. Thank you all for the support. It truly has helped me stay strong. The way he twisted the situation, claiming Grandma really wanted him to have the house, even though she had made her wishes crystal clear in the will, screams manipulation. And then threatening to ruin the sale if you didn't pay up? That's straight up blackmail. You did exactly what needed to be done. The open house stunt was pure genius. He embarrassed himself, not you. And the fact that some relatives still tried to defend him after he stole jewelry, damaged the house, and got arrested? That just shows how good he is at playing the victim. You were 100% right to stand firm and let the consequences catch up with him, OP. Ever had a relative try to claim something that clearly wasn't theirs? Share your stories with us in the comments. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time, and please put your chair back where you found it.